So look what we also did. We boosted up to 200 hertz.
That's fine.
And it's going to sound, no, it's going to sound terrible. It really is going to sound terrible. So I really don't prefer, one of my pet peeves is 80 hertz and above should basically be flat almost with the speaker response.
Hertz and above, you can get some weird sound.
Okay.
Yeah, unnatural, especially 120, 150, 200.
Like I said, my job is, as a design engineer, is to try and not screw up the source. That's the loudspeaker. What we can't control is where they're placed in a room. And boosting 80 hertz, 120 hertz, all that area, sounds terrible. And that's a number one mistake in this reflective room as well, too. So only boost the super low frequencies, not the 80 hertz and above is going to be one of our key decisions we'll talk about later. So we've designed in some capabilities to make it better in a room, but there's still acoustics that can't be fixed, right? Physics is physics. We can't really defy physics, and but we can do the best we can to design a great loudspeaker, position them in the best place in the room, and then move forward.
Hey, what is going on, guys? Today we're at Matt's house. So we're going to start off here in his garage. I just want to show you what Obsessed Garage is all about, man. They do everything from the cabinets to the flooring to the lighting to all of the chemicals, all of the cleaning products, pressure washers, all of that, garage doors. Eventually, I think Matt's in the process of doing that. Of course, they've got great sound here, all of the rags, all of the products, everything. But today, it's not about the garage. Of course, it's about the home theater. So we've got a really fun project we're going to be working on today. We are getting ready to go to the Florida Audio Expo this weekend. So the whole Perlisten team and Fidelity Imports team is here. They made the trip up here to Middleton. They're going to be hanging out with us today because Matt is upgrading his entire living room setup. We did a full series of videos on that one, probably maybe 3 months back, and that was on a PSB system. Super cool system, but now we're moving to Perlisten, and so I'm excited about this. It's the R series, so again, not super inexpensive, but it's the more affordable line in Perlisten. So we love what Perlisten stands for. Amazing quality and sound. The build quality is phenomenal. The style, the look, the design, aesthetics, the form, everything about it, we really, really like. We like what the guys are doing, and we like the people. And so I'm hoping in this video, you're gonna get a chance to just meet some of the guys behind the Perlisten brand. I know I've interviewed Dan and Lars as well as Eric over the years, but you're gonna hear from some others as well. Steve and Bob are here from Fidelity, and so I'm super pumped to introduce you to those guys. So we're just gonna head on in here, we'll hang out a little bit. Hey guys, we are here back in Matt's house. Several months ago, we installed a PSB and Dynaudio system. Matt liked it, but he didn't love it. And so he's been on this chase. He's been doing a lot of research. We've been talking with the guys at Perlisten. We have Perlisten's team here in Matt's house. This is awesome. This is gonna be super cool because we're gonna pick Eric's brain. Eric is the co-founder. He's the lead engineer. This is the guy that like builds and designs these cool systems for Perlisten. And so I'm excited, man. I think this is gonna be a fun conversation. This is a living room. This is something that I think a lot of you guys can relate to. This isn't the $1 million theater room that I just finished, filming.
Yeah, it's much different to live in a living space than a dedicated room. So yeah it's pretty cool, the things we need to talk about. So
part of what I would love to have in this conversation is I want to talk about some challenges that Matt's going to face in this room, some challenges that you guys face. What are some things that Perlisten has done on the science side of it to help mitigate those challenges? And then what is your process? So Matt and I know our process, but it's not based on science sometimes. It's based on just our experience. But you've been doing this a long time, and you know the ins and outs of your system, and you've tweaked and tuned a ton of systems. And so I would love to have that good conversation of where do we start? How do we begin to design a room and place the speakers? And we'll talk about, and this won't be a walkthrough how to, But I think we're going to have some really good nuggets of information that you can take away from this video and apply it in your own setup. We're going to dive into DIRAC, we're going to do some listening, and then, like I said, talk about really what does Perlisten bring to the table when it comes to 2-channel, a multi-purpose room like this, family room environment, or even in a dedicated theater room. So
yeah, there's a lot of basics we can cover that really are simple mistakes that we can improve a system right from the get-go. So it should be a good time.
yeah. So Eric, what is the first step when you're setting up, like, let's just pretend this is your room.
Yeah,
what
right.
would you do? What's the first step in laying out your system?
Really, the first step is there's a lot of limitations quite often in the living space. And some of them we can deal with and some of them we can't. So we'll talk about those, but really what I like to do is you put the speaker in the best location it can be to sound the best it can.
Okay.
I can't move these speakers, 3 or 4 feet out more,
Sure.
but I can move them inches.
Okay.
And you'll be surprised how much inches, toe in, toe out, a little bit away from the wall. So I like to listen in a 2-channel example. Just listen first and then make some tweaks, generally improve it. And now when you go to DSP can't fix everything. And a lot of us have that, kind of thought process that my processor is going to fix everything.
Right.
It can't. So let's get the best starting point. You put a chassis on a car that is, $10,000, you're never going to be a $100,000 car.
Right.
So if you make it the best framework you can, now you can make that car, build it out, do tweak and tune to make it as best as you can. It's the same with your home theater. Is let's get the best starting base layer, base groundwork, and let's make it sound as good as it can, and then let's correct for some room problems.
All right, Eric, so in Matt's room, he's going to have a 5.2.4 Dolby Atmos setup. So right now, we only have a few speakers unboxed. We're not unboxing the in-ceilings because Matt's going to have Mike come in and install those at a later date. But again, some of the things we're going to talk about in this video, those are the baby steps you take and the progression of building out a theater room in your living room. So here we've got your more entry level or more affordable series. So this is the R series. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the R series is our, just below the S series. S series is our flagship. What we really do and what our beliefs are is we're an engineering background company. We believe in engineering principles, design the best source you can. That's my job. Don't screw up the source. What we can't control is a lot of times the room.
Right.
And there's a lot of technology with the directivity control and a lot of those other things that we'll talk about in probably other videos, DPC array, and how we try to make the speaker sound better in a more typical situation of reflections and floor and ceiling and why we do that. But in general, the R series is a step down, but we don't take away things to create a product that's a little more affordable.
Right.
So what we truly believe in is scaling SPL and output capabilities, sometimes sensitivity, so it takes, it's for smaller rooms. But the general principles of the DPC, how we control the directivity, the frequency response, we believe in a flat frequency response. Whatever is recorded comes out. If the recording's terrible, it's going to sound terrible. If the recording's great, it's going to sound great. We don't over accentuate or try and EQ the speaker for a certain condition, because then one genre of music sounds great and the next doesn't, and that doesn't make any sense. So really we want a speaker that sounds good in home theater. We want it to sound good in 2-channel. We want it to sound good in everything it does. And that's key. So flat frequency response is really a key part of that. Yeah. And the off-axis and power response. So all those little techie things that a lot of research a long time ago was done about how does a speaker sound good in a room and what are those characteristics. So we build that in so you don't have to worry about it. You can be as techie as you want or not. It's behind there. It's it's behind the scenes, and that's what makes us, a great product. So the R series is that flagship tower, R70, 7 drivers tower. R series, 7 drivers tower is what that implies. And what I generally like to do in a system is to set up first, make it sound as good as possible in that room. We have a lot of limitations, and we'll see from some B-roll in this room about maybe there's a doorway and I can only go so wide from a position. Maybe the couch is in a certain position. We can't move that. Maybe we can a little bit to put it in the best position because I can't move the speakers. Toe in. A lot of those characteristics are tweaking in and out. You might think, oh, I just changed the speaker 1 little inch here. But you'll sit there and experience a 2-channel where the imaging was here and now it's here and it's huge. And those are small, minute changes. Also, the overall balance and frequency response throughout the whole bandwidth. Okay. When you have the luxury of taking some measurements, which we will in a bit here, you can see some of those effects of just bringing a loudspeaker maybe just another 6 or 8 inches out in the room. Okay. We have to watch in a room like this. We walk through here, so I can't stumble and trip over my speaker. But maybe we can move it out 6 more inches, and that made a more flat speaker and a better response, better sound quality. Yeah. So we look at those minor things that will make big improvements, and then we'll go to DSP. DSP can't fix everything. Correct. And so let's correct the things that we can do by starting out in a great position, and then we can go to the tuning process.
I love the fact that you're starting off with just 2 speakers, because a lot of us might just buy a whole system and we put it in a room and then we just hook it up, we run Dirac, we run Odyssey, and we think we're good, but you're starting at the foundation. Get the foundation, the 2 speakers right. Don't even add a subwoofer at first.
Yeah, absolutely. Just do that step. And then when we get into this system, we're going to have the R5Cs, our center channel. So in a movie situation, that's going to be your center. Sure. But there's a lot of content that's still 2-channel. Your TV shows, whatever. We want those imaging to come from the vocals in the TV, not above the TV or below the TV. We want to sound right. We want to sound natural. And a lot of our users are 2-channel listeners and AV users. So we might as well give them the best experience of both, because we can do both. Sure. So, maximize the product, get what you paid for. Let's make it sound as good as possible. And then once we have those kind of set, now we can look at, in this situation, we have 2 R210S. Right. So this is our push-pull technology. It has really low distortion, high dynamics. It's got a lot of DSP on board, so we can blend that in. We'll look at blending those in, and then after you have these set, now you can blend them in the best way. Okay. Because every time you move a position here, the frequency response changes, which means the subwoofer integration might change some too. So this really has to be solid first, and then we can go through that DSP process. Have you kind of done, hey, I kind of like where it's at, or what have you?
I've done no setup.
Okay.
Just pop them there.
Just pop them there.
And I try to measure off the line
on the flooring, because that's a good reference. So I think what we would like to start out with is, I generally walk into a room knowing the limitations of where we can put it, because this is a real living room. I would go in from some experiences that I've had and where I generally like speakers to be in a room, and I could walk up to one of these and just tweak it. So in general, let's do that.
So what are you seeing where I plop them here? So
where you plopped them here, there's one limitation. Well, there's 2 immediate limitations that pop out. One is the distance to the back wall.
So I'm willing to move them out if we need to.
So there's always this problem does not go away. And what happens is when the speaker emanates sound, it emanates, especially at lower frequencies, it emanates in 360 degrees. It goes everywhere. So what happens is the sound will go directly to the ear, and we'll have that first arrival. Sure. So that first arrival time is a beautiful loudspeaker, very few reflections from the room because it hasn't hit anything yet, right? Then we have reflections floor, we have reflections ceiling. Those happen later in time, right? They got to travel. Right. Just think of a sphere of sound expanding as it goes out in time, hits a reflection, and then bounces to your ear. Well, one of the major problems we have is that it bounces off the back wall, gets inverted in phase, and arrives later in time, but it's the same frequency. The reflection off of here will bounce and cause a notch. So it cancels. So we'll get lots of notches. We'll see this in the measurements. You'll see lots of notches and stuff like that.
Is that why some people tend to place maybe an acoustic panel back
That is
here?
exactly.
I think I can I think I could pull that off.
Yeah, and we can, and I have some ideas. We can talk about this some other time too, about cosmetic ways to do that. An appealing way that still fits in a home.
Sure, decor-wise.
Decor-wise, there's lots of beautiful artwork kind of scenarios of it's a painted picture on the other side. Behind it is some acoustic foam, some ways you could do that. The problem doesn't go away though. So if this is the half wavelength of some frequency, that's where the first problem's going to be. If I move it out, it's now just a different frequency, a different wavelength. I shifted the problem to a different frequency.
Okay.
The problem doesn't go away.
Okay. Unless I got it 6 feet off the wall.
Unless you got it really absorbed. I mean, we're in a living space. There will always be a frequency depending on wavelength that it will happen. So, but when we look at measurements, we might say that we compensate for some, the lesser of two evils.
Sure.
And we might say, hey, another 6 inches is a little bit better. We looked at some frequency response measurements, and 6 inches versus 10 inches is a better place for it to be. We also, in this scenario, because we have a doorway, are limited to how far right and left we can be. And what that might do is saying I have more seating positions, I get better coverage if it's a little wider, or not. Or Matt might say it's generally me. It's my spot, and that's all I care about. Okay. This is totally fine.
Okay.
My kids and wife, they don't give a crap.
Mine don't either.
Exactly. And in retrospect, they're still hearing great sound.
Yeah, right.
It's the whole area has a great source, has some great equipment. You're still getting great sound, but that prime spot is still just that little bit better. In general, what I prefer, this is my opinion, and everybody's can be a little bit different, but it is really, really critical about this position and distance to the main listening position. If you're the person of concern, we'll even take a laser measurement. And within inches, like when we get really 2-channel finicky, an inch or two, you'll be surprised, makes a big difference. Yeah. And so, just shoot at that pillow, put a little sticker saying that's my prime seating position. And what we generally like to do is maybe toe that in. Okay. And almost, it's a straight line to maybe if you're sitting on the couch, left speaker is...
So are they crossing?
Left shoulder. And right speaker is right shoulder.
Okay, no, not crossing.
Or you could go from there to crossing.
Okay.
So in that range, in general, that's where we kind of like it.
So you're saying by this left speaker would be Matt's left shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. Would be his right shoulder, and your toe in could be from that perspective.
Okay. That's a good starting point.
And that means you're getting pretty much a perfect flat response. If you like saying, maybe this is a reflective room, I got a little too much high frequency energy, maybe you toe it out a little more. But that distance from each right and left to that center position needs to be perfect. Okay. Like measure it within, inches, half inch, preferably, and you will notice a difference between saying I'm off 1 or 2 inches, and you think 1 or 2 inches, big deal. But if you are really into that 2-channel, that perfect sound, you will notice imaging is kind of here to here and large. That's inches. That is literally the capability of improving the sound quality from that position. And those are really the 3 largest things that you can kind of do is provide some sort of treatment back here. That could be beautiful decorative pillows. Okay. It could be, a bookcase with something in it that has got some absorption in one little pocket or a couple little pockets, and then it's books or knickknacks everywhere else that beautify the room. Okay. There's lots of ways to kind of hide how might I absorb those back waves and improve my overall response that you can do that are cosmetically acceptable. And so, from toe in, backing away from the wall, and maybe width. We have maybe a foot to maybe 8 inches here of capability in this room, and that's typical for people, right? And that's okay. Whatever limitations you're bound by, let's just get the best starting point we can.
100%.
And I think that's the key. I'm going to say I'm going to make this not quite perfect. I mean, from my eye, let's do this. We're on the front line of that. We're on the front line of this. So our distance off the back wall is about the same.
So here's his dead center.
Is that the sweet spot? Okay. So where's this tweeter pointing at you? I'm going to make it a little wider. Yeah,
it's quite a bit over here.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yep.
And
then that one's kind of doing the same thing. So these
that's
are
that's kind of about there.
Okay.
So let's pick some music and let's take a 5 minute
listen, just to see
5
what it
minute
sounds
first
like.
listen, and we can say what our impressions are. Sound like a good deal?
All right.
Oh, there you go.
So we got our little dude set up here, scientific. We made a little smiley face dude. So now what he's going to do is take a measurement. So where are you measuring from?
So we can choose. Let's just do his right eye, so to speak. We're going to put a laser in his eye. So
Gotcha.
I don't know if we're going to run any legal issues there with making him go blind.
How do I change this darn thing?
Oh, say meters?
Meters is
As
fine.
long as it's the same thing.
It'll measure the same thing.
Okay.
I'm an engineer. We use meters all the time, so that makes sense to me. So to his left eye is
8.935 meters.
8.935 meters.
All right,
so we want
let's
to see
go
if
over
this other
here
one's the same distance.
and see where we are to his right eye. Wow, is it really the same?
No way.
Yeah, there's no way.
The likelihood of that
Yeah.
is pretty slim.
That must have been stored in memory.
4.426.
Okay, so this one is closer. And therefore, there's two ways to look at this. The center position should be over here on the couch, or we could move the couch slightly. You know, there's a lot of ways to look at that. Or we could move that speaker farther out. One of the things when you start to look at this is cosmetically, now I'm going to have one speaker spaced out farther than that one.
Well, we didn't actually check this.
And so you could say, hey, is that something that I must have, or am I all about sonics? Right. And so these are all, personal preferences of what we can do in a room.
So we are, I'm going to do this here.
You could do the front foot. Yeah, you could do it the corner.
All right, so we're 22.
We're going to make sure we're the same distance from the cabinet.
Yeah.
The cabinet is centered,
Gotcha.
and we're 22.25. So there's our distance. So we're a 1/4 inch further out on this.
Further out in this one. So we could move that in. We could move the sub in. So that's probably a good 1/4 inch. And that's
8 centimeters.
Yep,
Right?
so that's a pretty decent amount. That is something where if I was going to be in a perfect 2-channel world, I would say I will notice imaging changes from that.
Okay.
So right now it could be easily as the reference listening position is now not on that main line, it's just over.
Okay.
And that's the easiest fix because maybe we want this to look very cosmetically cohesive of the sub is exactly this distance and that right and left is exactly that distance. Because a lot of times it throws your eyes off, right? How important is distance? So we could do that. We could do whatever preference we want, or we can move this further out. So those are personal choices, not my choices.
So I'd say we got plenty of room, so we move this out.
We can move it out, yeah, absolutely.
So how far do you think we need to go here?
Probably, yeah, probably let's try that. all the measurements. You killed our guy.
So Chase just came in, and he did not like
The laser.
our guy up here.
Oh, man.
He just attacked it.
That's our pillow.
Good boy, Chase.
Leave him alone. Leave him alone. He is not like
What? I'll keep you busy. How about this? I'll keep you busy.
There you go.
There's no laser.
Now Matt can measure.
There's no laser.
That's hilarious.
Now we should be in our, so to speak, think equilateral triangle, right? And so now what we would want to do is let's take a listen. And now it's almost hinge this foot. And what we might do is from one listening session to the next to just toe it in a little bit more and find out what we think is our preference. And there is no right or wrong way here.
Okay.
It is literally, hey, do I think the imaging got a little better? And some people are experienced listeners and may be able to pick that out instantly. And a lot of you saying, well, I don't really hear a lot of difference. And that may be enough for you to say, I'm done. I think it sounds good here.
Do you have a specific song that you use?
Yeah, probably, overall something with kind of good bass response, but also vocals. Really, at this point, we're more interested in saying, hey, the vocal imaging, a lot of those things are really good.
Give me somebody.
Is there a track that you like to go to, like your go-to track when you're
Yeah, there's a lot
setting this up?
on our phone that I'm not sure is available now.
Well, as long as you can pull up the name, then he can.
Yeah, let me look for a couple options here. So go Give Me a Reason, the 2023 album. All of those are amazing tracks from her. And now tell me where her vocal is coming from. So we listened to a track and we both sat and kind of thought where the position and the imaging was. And, when there's a speaker present, your brain will always snap to it, and so there's a center channel here. We're not playing anything through it. Right now, the experiment is 2 channels audio.
Sure.
Let's get them set up in the best position. So we listen to this vocal. It's very well recorded. Her vocal comes from about the center. Mm-hmm. So what we can do is I have some preferences that I tend to do about maybe more toe in and position. We got them right and left spaced pretty properly. So I'm going to toe them in a little bit. And we're going to get them a little more toned in.
Okay.
And then we'll do a second impression of saying, hey, do we think it's better or worse, and how we're going to move forward. So in general, what we prefer to do, this is not right or wrong. It's just what we kind of prefer to do. And when I do a setup, is if I kind of look at this, my arm coming out, the tweeter and the wave guide is kind of straight out position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to anchor this foot, front, front right.
Front outer.
Really our position right and left isn't going to change.
Gotcha.
And I'm just going to change the tweeter a little more pointing at the listening position. And then we can do measurements and get it as perfect as we want to.
So this will be the opposite. This will be
and so
the
anchored
very front right.
Yep, and actually this probably already is pretty close to pointing at the listening position.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit there more. And then we can do a measurement and make it perfect. But maybe even that was off the cuff, but a little more appropriate. We can even sit down and take a listen to that.
Definitely improved.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was definitely an improvement. I think that was your perception too about, position where it is, the depth of that. One thing that can happen is when you pull them away from the wall, you're limited by the wall. You can't really go behind the wall. Mm-hmm. So what happens is when you move a speaker out, that distance is now the depth of field of the recording. And so when you move them away from the wall, that's one advantage of saying now the imaging isn't here, it can be behind the speakers. So that's one of the things we kind of look at. But also just towing them in, it's very pinpoint, but yet it's not, there's a sense of involvement around it. As you kind of tweak them better and better and better, you can say, yeah, it's centered, but it's kind of everywhere versus it's centered. And now there's, you can almost envision a person at a microphone standing right there. Yeah. And that's the future, the impression and the improvement you can make from having that perfect position.
So the key takeaway from this is try, listen, make some small adjustments. We're talking half an inch, or we're talking an inch?
Sometimes it depends on your capabilities as a listening experienced listener.
Okay.
So, a lot of times we could sit 5 people here and they're like, that all sounds great to me. But if you really want to get detailed and you listen quite often, you can get quite good at saying, oh yeah, now if you're kind of told what to listen for, if you're not experienced, you kind of saying, oh yeah, now that you said it, that vocal is more positioned properly. Okay. It's directly in the center. There is some depth. But that takes experience, and we're all over the map. Some of us have a lot of experience, some of us don't, and it's up to you to tweak to what level you want to do and improve. Some people love the experimentation, some people don't. Some people is like, I'm putting them there. I did some pretty good metrics of measuring where it's pretty close. Let's move on.
That's how I usually do it.
Yeah. So,
Exactly.
but it's about, it's your system, right? It's what you do. You know, how you wash your car is maybe this is the best way, but I really like to wash my car in this order. It's slightly different or whatever. You can do whatever you want. It's your system. And some people, like 6 months later, they go, oh, they'd like to tweak. They like to go back and do that and make improvements and saying, I can make it better. So it's personal preference, right? It doesn't have to be, scientific. It can be. It's up to you.
So once we get the speakers where we want, let's say this was the final,
Yep.
This is where we like it best, what's our next step?
So our next step is now, there's also, the subs are in a pretty good position here. That is something that DSP does relatively well.
Okay.
When I look at placement in a room, when I have subs, you like it to not be in the exact same position. And since this room is offset, that means that the modes that we excite in this room, so there's the sound as it emanates, and there's a reflection off the back wall. And in subwoofers, we get a lot of modes because the wavelengths are really long compared to the room.
Okay.
And that's one of the biggest problems for a subwoofer, to not have a flat response in a room, meaning there's lots of peaks and dips. Those are called by standing room modes. Having a subwoofer not an exact dimensional position in the room, so if that one is, let's say that's 8 feet off the wall, and this one was 8 feet off that wall, that means they would excite the same modes. That also means they'd have the same peak and dips in the room. We're not fixing anything. So one is 8 feet, that's maybe 12 feet in an open space. That's actually an advantage. So cosmetically, they're in a perfect symmetrical location, but they're not symmetrical in the room. And that could be a good thing. This one's going to excite modes a little bit different than that one.
Okay.
And that means we can average them out to get a more even response. That's really the advantage of saying I have 2 subwoofers. I have 4 subwoofers. The advantage is more modes are excited in different positions and the frequency responses get averaged, and we get a better overall response as a system. So that's really the advantage, especially from 1 sub to 2 sub. It's also scaling SPL for loudness, but it creates better frequency response. And that is an improvement that DSP does quite well because those wavelengths are longer. It can help alleviate some of those problems as well. So cool. I think, subs are in a great position. It's unequal within the room distance. I see the center channel here, and this is going to be one of the common mistakes here, is that a lot of times it's cosmetic as well. Is the center channel, you want it pushed back towards the wall as far as possible. DSP can't correct for really, really early reflections. So the first reflections that are coming off of that are on the tabletop.
Yeah, so we want to bring that up to the front
So
of that.
if in a lot of people, they may have the cosmetic position, but when they listen to movies, they bring it out to the front. That's an option. A lot of people don't like to go through that effort. It's up to you. But DSP can't correct for that really early in time reflection. So moving it out will help improve that. We're still going to have eventually a reflection off the room, or off the floor, I should say. But that's going to be at a lower frequency, longer wavelength, because it's a farther distance. So you never truly fix problems. You maybe position them in the best way to be correctable.
Okay.
And a longer wavelength versus that really early in time reflection off the tabletop is probably something that's a little more easy to deal with in DSP to solve for that problem. And so that's how we try and mitigate the problems as we move forward and then work on the DSP.
So that's one of those real world problems where, am I lazy?
Right.
What do I care? What do I care about most? My time and energy, or do I care about how it looks? Obviously, it's going to look best pushed up against the wall.
Yep.
It's going to sound best out at the front of the stand.
Yep.
So if I'm lazy, I would pull it all the way forward. If room aesthetics matter more, then I would
push it all the way back, and maybe you deal with the problem, or you bring it out when you're really serious.
I'm not lazy, and the room aesthetics matter, so I'll move it back and forth.
Well, and like I said, my job is as a design engineer is to try and not screw up the source. That's the loudspeaker. What we can't control is where they're placed in a room. And so the next step is to try and say, let's mitigate those, put them in the best position we can, and move forward. And then we talk about our directivity control. So you asked me, well, we have this directivity control. Why would that early reflection off the tabletop be an issue? Because with the DPC, we're controlling that down to 1 kilohertz. But now we still have the woofers emanating sound. Those will have an early reflection off of there. So we've designed in some capabilities to make it better in a room, but there's still acoustics that can't be fixed, right? Physics is physics. We can't really defy physics. But we can do the best we can to design a great loudspeaker, position them in the best place in the room, and then move forward. Probably the thing that we'll hear is maybe the hum of a refrigerator or something like that. And, we could go in and measure with an app saying what's that SPL level and I want to be 20 dB above that pretty easily.
Gotcha.
And so that's one thing to set up. And if there is a measurement and there's a loud bang in the middle of it, technically you screwed up your measurement. So, make sure you're home alone or everybody's gone or they went shopping. Because those are things that are truly do make, it's not just being technical. Those do affect the measurement process. They can make or break it. And so that's one thing. And again, I'm not necessarily the D-Rock expert, but generally we want a little bit of gain here on the microphone. It really depends on the microphone and sensitivity. That is something provided by Marantz. So, that amount of level is, I'm talking and, we're basically, if I'm starting to hit this level with my measurement, I'm going to saturate the mic and it's going to provide bad data to D-Rack to do the calibration. So what I might do is make the master level approximately here. Let's play a level. I usually want some headroom here. So hopefully we want the ability to say, I would say let's start out at -6. And let's just try a little bit of output and let's see where we're at in the microphone. We're a pretty good noise floor. We've got, still have some headroom here. I'm going to say that's good. 7.2, so those are pretty well tuned. Now the subwoofer. It'll sleep mode. So what I'm venturing to say is that generally the more affordable processors, even though they may be a couple grand, only put out about 1.4 to 2.6 volts. So that means as a gain structure, they'll never get loud enough to drive the subwoofer to full output capabilities. So one of the cool things on the app, you could do sensitivity. So master volume will bring all subs up together. So if I got 1, 2, 3, 4 subs. Another advantage is if we go into each individual sub and I go to input control, there's a -6 dB. So that's like our really high-end 2-channel clients. They maybe have preamps that have 16 volts out. So we don't want to saturate our A to D converter in our amp or in our subwoofer. So we would bring the gain down. Most equipment is in the 0 dB range. So that may be that 4 to 6 volts of input. But a lot of AV processors may not have a lot of voltage out. It's usually 1.4, maybe 2.6 volts. And that may be where we change the gain to a +6 dB so that even with this low level, I will be able to drive the subwoofer to full output capabilities. So, that's kind of what's really cool about Perlisten and our subs is there's not many choices in most subwoofers to make these kind of adjustments to maximize your subwoofer. And this is about signal and noise. So inherently in the circuitry, this is a better way to run the setup to reduce distortion and actually get what you paid for. You paid for a great subwoofer, low distortion. And our gain structure is really, really important. Even professionals really don't understand gain structure. And this happens all the time of people not really properly setting up the subwoofer. So now let's just go and let's do that in the other scenario on the other subwoofer. So both subwoofers, we're using the RCA input and we're adjusting the gain to +6 because this processor probably only puts out 2.4 volts. And so that's a tweaky, but really about true design features that make a difference in sound quality and what we're doing. So yeah, so let's do that. Now we're going to be 6 dB louder, so maybe I have to turn this down on the input a little bit. That's actually about right. And that one should be about the same. It's going to wake up from sleep mode here. It's 11.8. Yeah, so we're within a dB there, so I think we're good. So now we can go on to the next process. I'll let you drive since you're probably more experienced at this. So there's a lot of, Dirac has some settings about, what are we doing? Do I care only about my seat and having the best response, or do I want to average out a lot of positions? That's really up to you. So we can kind of look at that. Probably maybe we got the subwoofer gain a little bit too much here. So, here's 10 hertz. So, 12, 13, probably by 14 hertz here, we've got a ton of output capability. What we're looking at is this is a raw measurement. This is quite often what we hear in a room. And these are all the really early reflections and all those kind of things that are happening in this room, right? They're bouncing around, coming off the walls, and we hear that. You can kind of see some room modes in here. So actually, I think we can go in and we can show one measurement at a time, all right? So that's front left. We can kind of see what would I really prefer. I know because I'm a designer and we show it on our tech data that this is a flat frequency response. So it looks like a flat line when you look at it as isolating the room. You take a loudspeaker and you measure it at 2 meters away from the front of it, and it's a flat frequency response. So all of this is the impact of what happens when you put a speaker in a room. And so these are real live effects. And, in general, you can say it's a nice flat response all the way up to almost 10K, and then it kind of rolls off. That's generally what happens in a room. There's nothing wrong with it or bad with it. And actually, we kind of want that. When we start to get into this 2 to 3 or 400 hertz, this is what we call the transition frequency. And that's when the wavelengths in the room of the frequencies that were coming out of the loudspeaker get longer and longer. And that means the impact of the reflections off the walls don't make just lots of little average peaks and dips. They actually really start to put gain and notches and cancellations in the signal. That 100, 120 hertz, that could be stuff off that's probably not the back wall yet. That's probably a side wall. There's some of these stuff in here. That extra gain is probably off the back wall. So that reflection that we talked. And they can come back and they can actually sum. So like 2 waves on the ocean, right? When 2 waves hit, those 2 become a larger peak and the trough becomes deeper.
Yeah.
That's what acoustics is. That's what's happening in a room. They come at different time. When those 2 waves cross through each other and one's going in one direction, one goes the other, the timing is different, and now they're more of an average wave. So time is really important when those are happening. So that reflection comes back in time. At one frequency, it will produce a lot of gain, and one frequency will cause a lot of cancellation. And so ocean waves, cancellations, peaks and troughs are a good way to visualize what's happening in my room. So you'll start to see, okay, there's a notch here. That could be from floor reflection. That could be from back wall reflection. There's a lot of ways that could be. We are about minus 15 kind of dB overall here. My sub's about 5 dB hotter, maybe a little more. So that's most people kind of like that. And we can tweak that in a target curve too, and we will.
Yeah.
But in general, you're seeing what happens to a speaker in a room. If I was a perfect 2-channel world and I didn't have DSP, none of this is correctable. So I might work a little harder about bringing those out, positioning them to get the best overall response. But these kind of things direct can correct for. These are kind of the problems that DSP is good at, and can help make this a flatter response. And we can go to, that's the front left speaker. That's in a different position from that wall versus the right on that wall. So the right is going to be a little different. Pretty symmetrical and similar. There's a peak here like there was, but actually it's a little less gain here. It's a little more average response. So 2 speakers, exact same frequency response, 2 different positions in the room. The rooms have slightly different effect and impact on that response. So that's really kind of an example of, we can't separate the speaker from the room. We can do some things as a designer to help improve it, but this is what really happens, and this is why DSP can be very beneficial.
So do you know the answer to when Dirac, when we run multiple positions, is it just confirming? Is it creating a summation?
It's creating a summation. So what you're really learning about this, and it can get as technical as we want, we're learning about the sound field. What we're learning is by this measurement in this position and then this position, we're learning lots of things about this room. And it's not, I'm taking pictures. It's like taking pictures and measurements as a builder or designer. When I'm going to say I'm going to build this room, right? These are the tools that as an acoustician we use to saying, I know that I moved it over to this position. Dirac knows that suggested position because it's telling me to move it there. And I know I am now closer to that speaker than that speaker. It helps me understand that the first time arrival is the speaker, and the reflection is I moved over there. I'm now further away from this wall, and I'm potentially closer to that wall. The Dirac doesn't know that. It doesn't have a picture of your room. But acoustically, it can measure when the second time of arrival, which it's going to assume is a reflection from something.
So it's starting to
figure out what the room is. The more measurements we can take, the more acoustic data we learn about this room, and then we can make it. Then that in their algorithm, it starts to saying, what's the intelligent decisions I need to make from the data of corrections to make.
I'm really excited for AI to start to get introduced into this world.
It is, so AI can absolutely do a lot of that kind of stuff. And so what's really intriguing is that the more measurements I take, the more data I have to learn from.
The harder it is to process that.
The harder it is to process that. And sometimes you give it so much data that it can't make a decision at all. So you're making, I've got all of these problems and you want me to correct for all these problems. And when you say, I want it to sound good for all 7 seats here, or how many people can fit on this couch, then you're starting to make sacrifices as well too. So there's a sweet spot of saying I want to correct for X amount of positions, but I can't correct for everything. I can't make it sweet for everybody, but I can make it really good for everybody. So that's when they say, in the previous choice is, do you want a focused listening position? Do you want a more, I got a wider couch? Do I want more people to have a good experience? And then from those choices, that was input for the algorithm to say, I'm going to sacrifice this, but I'm going to make a bigger deal out of these other measurements. Or am I a single seat in this room and I'm the only person that I care about? And it's like, I am focusing on that is the best experience everywhere, and I will make sacrifices about seating position 2, 3, 4. And so that's what you're truly learning here. And then when we get into the subwoofers, you can see, okay, we've got lots of gain, 12, 14 hertz. We've got lots of gain here.
That looks like a Matt Mormon curve right there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of why I left that gain a little bit up a little bit more. But when we start tweaking, you'll see what I hate is 80 hertz and up, there's no additional boost. A lot of the Dirac curves or other, let's say when you get they have a suggestive primary curve, right? Yeah. And boosting 80 hertz, 120 hertz, all that area sounds terrible. And that's a number one mistake in this reflective room as well, too. So only boost the super low frequencies, not the 80 hertz and above is going to be one of our key decisions we'll talk about later. Is save a project, yes. I think we timed out a little bit during our discussion. And so those are kind of, some of the things that we'll take a look at. But again, when we look at subwoofer 1, there's a very narrow peak and dip. That's a standing room mode at 30, 40, about 45 hertz. Let's go on to the second subwoofer. That notch isn't there. That's good, right? Because we had the asymmetry of where the subwoofers were. So one is going to support that frequency. The other one has a problem there. Together, they're going to help fix each other. They're going to average out and give us a really good response. And actually, that's a fantastic uncorrected curve from that subwoofer already. That's a great curve. And that's where larger rooms can be an advantage. Is smaller the room, the tighter the impact of all the modes. They all bunch up at similar frequencies. So odd dimensions, odd rooms. That's really the advantage of when you have that perfect home theater that's a square box. It means all the modes are all exactly the same frequency. That's actually a problem. When you have asymmetry in the acoustic space, we've got an open doorway to a bathroom, to an upstairs, to this back area with an offset wall here. That helps break up the modes. They happen at different frequencies and they average out over time. That can be an advantage. The disadvantage is we're not going to acoustically treat this room much. And so that's a disadvantage. So everything has its good and bad features, but that's a great subwoofer position. That's a great response before it's even corrected.
All right, so we got the crew back from lunch. So we're gonna just have some more dialogue here. Dan's gonna take a look at some of the initial measurements.
Yeah, can you tell us what we're looking at here?
So yeah, you latecomers, we already talked about this.
You'll have to watch the video.
No, we just started to talk about actually one step back. We just looked at the raw measurements and what that meant, where the standing room modes were, where they were coming from, early reflections, floor, ceiling, maybe even off the center channel, off the top of that desktop, and some of those things that Dirac can fix and some of the things that Dirac can't fix, like very early reflections and how to affect those. So we really just looked at the raw measurements here. And this is the first dive into starting to look at what's it mean when I start looking at a target curve. And, so what we're going to do is we're going to do bass control. Number one pet peeve is a lot of people really try and make this a flat loudspeaker, especially even at that, sometimes even that 2, 3, 4 kilohertz, you definitely want to roll it off. What somebody might do too is really try and boost from 10 to 20K, and you dump a lot of power in the speaker that is not needed, going to be excessively bright, especially in a lot of reflections in this type of room. So what is generally the starting curve is pretty far off in general. The next pet peeve is when we roll off the subwoofers, you can start to saying, hey, what frequency are we going to choose here and what are we going to do? Is a lot of people, you can even see it in this curve, they start boosting at this almost up to 200 hertz where they start to bleed in the curve. And a lot of people like elevated bass. So
I do.
Let's say we
plus 3.
So what happens when I start elevating the bass? Let's do the common. Let's plus 10. Plus 10. So look what we also did. We boosted up to 200 hertz.
That's fine.
And it's going to sound, it's going to sound terrible. It really is going to sound terrible. So I really don't prefer, one of my pet peeves is 80 hertz and above should basically be flat almost with
Yeah,
the
I would say
speaker
100
response.
hertz and above, you can get some weird sound.
Okay.
Yep.
Unnatural, especially 120, 150, 200.
And that's actually going to increase the problems that we have in this room where we don't have the ability to do a lot of room treatment. So, Dirac and its capabilities to adjust this in the curve, I think, I'm not a Dirac expert, but there's a button in here we can pull down point by point, and we could pull some of this energy down and make it more granular, and also bring this, this curve down.
So if you click the
where is
point
that?
to point is right there.
Is that one or is this one?
The other one.
Yeah.
There you go. So
Okay.
now you can. That's on the base.
You can- I
Oh,
think-
that's right. That's per group, right? So you
Yep,
can do
yep.
this per group.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Individuals.
So that's I wouldn't overly boost these areas. I would drop these.
Natural response.
Allow the natural response of the speaker. A lot of people think that I need this elevated high frequencies, and it's going to sound really, really bright.
One of the things that in our call that Dan had suggested is just take your whatever shelf filter, just yank it over to 300 hertz.
Yeah.
Just let the speaker does what it does.
Yep.
that's
Yep.
fair, 'cause
Exactly.
That's what Mike Rusty and I have been doing on our systems. Just
And
make it
then,
simple.
And
know-
you're just fixing the room, and you're not trying to fix anything else. And below 300 is where the room definitely dominates.
And then down here, you're subwoofer controlled. So you can put in, whatever boost you want. You want your,
boosting 20 hertz really heavy.
yeah, 70, whatever
Does
you
it-
want in that
Does it
area.
matter this is smooth? Right? Like we're always trying to make this nice smooth curve.
I would try to.
Yeah,
Continuous.
what we may find if we look at the individual curves is you may say, oh, there is a problem here of, a lot of movies have recorded dialogue is pretty easy to mess up, and a lot of that comes from the loudspeaker designer in the design. So they try and accentuate it for movies when you don't want to. Still, you want a flat speaker. So there's a lot of problem areas that can sometimes be from early reflections, and there's 200 is kind of a problem area. Sometimes we get too much energy.
That's
2 to
the low end
400.
vocal.
Yeah, 200 and 400. So listen to male vocals, what's happening there. And a lot of times at 200, 400 range, there's some unnaturalness, and usually pulling it down a little bit. So those are really kind of the tweaks you want to do.
Could you go in
Don't-
here, let's say 200 is junk, and just do one of these deals?
Yeah, no, it's dBs or half of dBs. It's not a giant notch of a lot of energy, and because you can see the loudspeaker is pretty balanced already, so we're just kind of correcting for those room modes, the transition frequency, which we talked about when the room starts to become very modal.
Sure.
And looking at it from that position. And then, where's the crossover want to be? So a lot of times that's in that 80 hertz range. That's generally a pretty good. This one's at
Do you have
70
the
hertz.
speaker only, or is this?
We're showing both groups. So we only took one single measurement. We didn't go through the whole one mic position. So we didn't go through all of that. But we just generally wanted to talk about maybe what's a pretty decent target curve, and looking at it from that perspective. That downward sloping, there's a kind of a common 1 dB per octave. I prefer a little bit more, especially in a reflective room like this. It gets pretty out of touch. And now we literally just want to do this to our tastes. You like a little more bass, somebody else doesn't. Somebody maybe it is a little too bright. Let's turn it down. So there is no right or wrong.
Okay, so what I would normally do is export, listen, come in here, tweak,
Yep.
make another, call it something else, export, A/B that,
Yep.
and do that maybe 2 or 3 times.
What's interesting is just being worried about the subwoofer placement, but what these curves are confirming is you've got really good support below 20 hertz without corner loading them or anything
Yeah.
like that.
It's around the
That's
middle of the
quite
room.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about room gain and how that was
Well, I was
affecting
worried
our
about
response.
symmetry, but it makes sense that it's not really symmetric
That's actually-
because of where the wall
Yeah,
is.
when we saw that frequency
you were
response
gonna
is
maybe put that side
fantastic.
there
Like that is asymmetrical distance from that one versus that one, and this one had some room modes and issues. It still looked really good, but that one didn't.
Did you move
And those average.
out further?
We did a little bit to get our perfect distance. We weren't perfect here, so we moved that one out a little bit more. That one you can't move towards the door, so we moved that one out.
Yeah.
And now we got the perfect time alignment.
And so I get my visual
Aesthetics.
symmetry, but my subwoofers aren't really symmetrical. Even though they're visually, they're symmetrical off the center, but not in the room.
That worked out well.
Yep. So overall,
what
this
is
might
this
be a good
doing?
choice.
This phase correction business. I've never. Sometimes it requires you to do it, and so see, it wouldn't allow you to go to the next step without.
Without it, yeah. So
And then you can calculate.
then you can do the
and
calculation.
export, yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know what it means. What is it phase correcting individual drivers?
It's probably the
impulse
impulse
response
response correction on the
that
loudspeaker.
would be my
So now
guess.
you can say, here's your target curve. It created a new target curve. It had one little problem area. It couldn't correct too much there.
What's nice is
but
it's
it's-
50 hertz null. Can't see it on the camera right now, but
Yeah,
it's quite
that's
nice. It
corrected.
fixed between
Yeah,
the two
that's
subs, so the two subs are complementing each other to fix that problem.
So when one has a big dip, the other one doesn't, then it'll.
they help that average that out.
It's
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect, almost
Yep.
perfect.
So explain. You said impulse. That can actually. There's somewhere in where I can look
Time
at the-
domain.
Yeah, it's what happens when that initial wave is coming out of the loudspeaker, right? So you're sending it a broadband signal, and it's called an impulse response. It's what we look at when we take frequency response over the loudspeakers, but that's what happens in your room as well. It's signals provided, what comes out, what's the bandwidth of it, and you look at it in a time domain. So how well it reproduces, there's all the data actually comes out of that impulse response into the frequency domain and represents the frequency response.
Yeah,
but
what you can't see in this picture is what's happening over time, whereas the impulse shows you. So the impulse might have a lot of energy way out in time. That means your room is very reverberant, if not becoming echoey, right?
Right.
And this room being so big could have
Okay,
that.
so you're getting energy measured way after this signal was actually produced. 'cause
Right.
It's bouncing around.
we remember we talked about the first wave coming from the loudspeaker, right? Then there's reflection 1, 2, 3, and 4.
So you can
And-
see other impulses that are just the reflections coming back over
Because
time.
this would somewhere in here
We should be able
tells
to
us
flip to
that.
it, yeah.
Where was it? Target curve. I always remember flipping on the impulse screen. I'm like, I don't even know what is that.
In the drop down.
Here it is, right here.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Yeah, so you see the initial response. So dead space, right? That's the time of flight, they call it.
Yeah.
So energy coming to you, and then you get the initial response, and then now you're getting reflections. A fairly strong one. I don't know why that's red.
Is that 36 milliseconds, probably?
Yeah, that's probably a millisecond.
One subwoofer and one's the speakers.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, so we can go.
All right, so we are pretty much going to call it a day. We're going to wrap up here. It's been a blast having the team of Perlisten as well as Fidelity Imports here. Just hanging out with these guys. It's been super, super cool. Just picking Eric's brain and finding out what he would do in a 2-channel setup and what is the beginning process. Of course, this is just a beginning of a series of videos that we're going to do here on the channel, because Matt's got to connect the center channel. He's got to add and install the surround sound speakers as well as the Atmos speakers. And so we didn't want to do, a full calibration. That's why we only did like one measurement, so that you guys can just kind of talk through and figure out what is in Eric's brain and how he would go about, and what are some things that we can tell from the measurements, and maybe hopefully some things that you can pick up from this video. One thing that I learned today was just because the subwoofers are symmetrical, maybe, to the left and right of the cabinet, doesn't mean they're symmetrical in your room. I didn't think about that, because over here you can see this subwoofer, we've only got maybe 7 feet, but then this subwoofer here, the next wall is way over there by the door, so that could be to your benefit. And so just because you have an oblong shaped room or oddball shaped room doesn't mean that that's going to be a detriment to your room. It actually could benefit. So I'm going to bring you guys along for the ride as we continue to build out Matt's living room system. This Perlisten system sounds amazing, but I can't wait to get the full 7.2.4 system. And he's also going to be installing a Primary processor. I've never heard of Primary processor, as well as Primary amplification. So stay tuned for those videos as well. Hope you guys have an incredible week. God bless. Catch you in the next video.